Thank you for registering for the Library of Virginia's Genealogy Workshop. I am Ashley Ramey. I am the Community Outreach Specialist for the library, and I coordinate all of the genealogy workshops. And you probably received an email from me with all of Cassandra's handouts, as well as information about this webinar. Our speaker today is Cassandra Britt Farrell. She has been employed at the Library of Virginia for 18 years on August 12th, 2020. She is the library's senior map archivist and has an electric job that focuses on collection management, collection development, reference, and public relations. Cassandra earned her BA in history in 1996 from Bryan College and earned her MA in history from Old Dominion in 1999. She worked at Colonial Williamsburg as an adjunct instructor in history at the Thomas Nelson Community College and spent one very long year teaching in middle school history and English. Currently, Cassandra serves on the board of directors for the Washington Map Society and begins working on her doctorate in history this fall with George Mason University. And I'm giving it over to you, Cassandra. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you for joining us this morning for Virtual Map Genealogy Workshop, More Than Just a Pretty Picture, Reading and Interpreting Maps, Part 1. And this session will focus on why are maps critical to genealogical research, how to read and analyze maps, and discuss some of the maps that you can use in your researches, genealogical, any kind of research really. It will help you out with that. And so to begin with, I'm going to move to the next slide here, if it will let me. Here we go. There we go. And whoops, went too fast. Here we go. Why are maps critical to genealogical research? The first reason I've got listed is maps provide a visual image of the time period that you're researching. You can actually look at the map and you get a visual image of what the Commonwealth of Virginia looked like in 1825, or what the state of Pennsylvania looked like in 1850, or what the Western Territories looked like in 1845, 1870. It just gives you a visual of what their world was like, albeit it's a visual of their world at a smaller scale, but it is a visual. And what maps allow you to do as a genealogist is you can actually trace the development of transportation routes, because the transportation routes available to our ancestors varied from century to century, decade to decade. And as you look at maps beginning with, let's say, for example, 1796, you can see the post routes available, you can see the major roads. If you look at a map from 1830, you can then see the national roads, the turnpike roads that have been constructed. And then by the 1850s, there are several railroad lines crisscrossing the nation. And as you move into the 20th century, not only do you have railroads, you have highways, highway maps, and by golly, you actually can travel by airplane too. So the maps help you see what transportation routes were available for your ancestors, and may help explain why they went to a particular place, because that was the route available to them at the time that they were moving. You can also trace the decline of a village or a town as industries change in history. You can view maps. You can view maps over decades, and you can see where a village once existed. By 1850, it may no longer be there. There are examples in Virginia's history where a village existed in one spot in 1790. And due to a variety of reasons, change in transportation routes, perhaps the town was located by a river bed, and that creek or that river section silted in, and so they lost revenue. because of lack of shipping traffic. Things like that, incidences like that can be reasons why a village or a town might decline. People might move away and move someplace else. And maps help you to trace this decline and trace the decline of a particular industry. And also, maps can help you identify migration routes, which we kind of discussed with the second bullet point, where you trace the development of transportation routes. Again, if you look at a map, you can look at the areas or the routes that they had available to them to travel to Tennessee in 1800, or to travel from Virginia to Illinois in 1850. And you can also understand why they chose that particular route. The maps you're looking at may show a particular dense stand of forest in one area, so that's not a good place to travel through. The mountain terrain may be rough in another area, so you can't go through that because there aren't a lot of openings, and that's one reason why the Cumberland route was so popular at the end of the 18th century going into the 19th century, because it was a natural opening in the mountains for folks to travel from Virginia into Kentucky. Also, people move for a variety of reasons, and migration is bi-directional. They can go to Illinois in 1815 or 1825 or 1830, but they can also come back to Virginia in 1840. So the migration routes can change, and folks rarely traveled nonstop from their home village to their new destination. It's not uncommon to hear of groups of people traveling. They get to this particular town, they decide to stay there for a few years before they move on. And so reviewing the maps can help explain why your ancestors were located where they were located at a particular time. And maps can also help identify where you can find records. If you look at a map from 1850, you can check to see where the county courthouse is located. In a number of states, local records are kept at the local county courthouse. You can look at a present day map and see where the local county courthouse is located. So identifying where a courthouse is located is helpful, because then you know that that is a place where you could possibly conduct some research or find some records related to your family. And if you're interested in migration trails, Carrie Eldridge has published a nifty group of atlases identifying migration trails and migration routes used by Americans in the 18th and 19th centuries. It's a very helpful series. And when you are just going back to where to find records, just keep this in mind. As you look at maps, they can help identify where county records are located. They can also identify changes in property and in land ownership, and they can also show you where county boundaries may have changed. For example, in Virginia in the 18th and 19th centuries, it was very common for counties to emerge out of other counties. And let's say, for example, you had family members who were living in Augusta County in 1780. You can find them in Augusta County, but by golly, in the year 1805 or 1800, you can't find them anymore, but you know they're still in the area. Perhaps the county they resided in split from Augusta. And so that might explain why you can no longer find them in Augusta, because they're actually living in another county. So if it looks like your ancestors dropped off the face of the earth, maybe their property shifted to another locality. Just a thought to keep in mind. So maps can also help you identify topographical features. And again, this goes back to why folks may have chosen this route over another because topographical features determine what the route should be. Perhaps there's a mountain there, can't really get around it. Perhaps there's a river, you have to find an alternate route to cross it. Perhaps there's just really bad terrain that you have to travel over, so you're going to try to look for a different route. And maps can also show a sense of community. They can provide insight into the culture, into your ancestors' culture. They can also help identify what the map maker's worldview was, because maps can and often do represent the worldview of a map maker, or their view of America, or their view of a region. And they can also, and this is important to remember, 19th century maps, 18th century maps, 20th century maps, 21st century maps, they can all reflect the tastes, the perceptions, the prejudices, the pride, the biases, the beliefs of the era in which they lived. So, you know, just keep this in mind. Maps are reflective of a culture, and they can be reflective of perceptions and prejudices and bias and beliefs of that particular era. And yes, maps can be used as propaganda tools. Yes, they can be. And there have been many a country who has fought over a boundary line because of what's shown on a map. So yes, they can be used as propaganda tools. Fortunately, if you're using maps in genealogical research, they can provide footprints of where towns and cities and large farms were located. And they can also help you analyze the information you've gathered about your family. And the maps can help you, the researcher, see the information from a different perspective. So you've looked at all the paper documents, or you've looked at the census records, or you've gone through the county tax records, or the state tax records, and you're looking at a map, and it gives you a different perspective about the information that you've gathered. So if you're stuck in your research, I would encourage you to maybe take a look at a map, because looking at that visual may help you look at your research quandary in a different light, your research question in a different light. So don't discount the use of them. Yes, they are pretty, but they're more than just pretty pictures. They can provide viable, valuable information in a pictorial format. So it's important to know what types of maps are available for research. And it's also important to know how to read a map. So as you research, you want to know what information you can find on a map and where you can find it. And so what I'm going to do now for the next several minutes is explain how to read a map. And we've got, as an example, this beautiful new map of Virginia with its canals, roads, and distances, published in 1850. Notice the emphasis in the title: canals, roads, and distances. Published in 1850. There's a lot of use of color here, and as you can see, the publishers decided to help identify the different counties with the use of color. And that is not uncommon for 19th century maps, county and county maps, state maps in particular. Map publishers, when they published maps of a state, oftentimes would identify the different counties with color. So color can be a very important tool in mapping. So let's just take a look at the information you can find on a map, and that you as a researcher should be looking for and taking note of as you research this map. First of all, there's a section called the color, and I'm going to see if I can't pull up my pointer here. The collar is this section right here. It's the area between the end of the sheet the map is on and the neat line. And the neat line is the boundary of the map itself. Well, the collar is that area in between the end of the sheet the map is on and the neat line. And oftentimes you can find valuable information. Sometimes it might be hand scribbled, sometimes it might be printed, but do not discount looking at the neat line. I mean, at the collar. Do not discount that, because you can oftentimes find very helpful information in this area, especially if you are trying to research the map itself. Not using the map for genealogical research, but using the map itself, researching the map itself. This area may contain information that will be helpful to you. And then, of course, this area can possibly include coordinate information, source citations. So especially when you're looking at 20th century maps, don't discount looking at the collar area. This can provide a wealth of information. Perhaps the most important information on a map is the title. And the title here for this nifty 1850 map of Virginia is A New Map of Virginia, with its canals, roads, and distances from place to place along the stage and steamboat routes. The title is usually the largest text on the map, and it's oftentimes one of the most important pieces of information on the map, because it can include information about what is the theme of the map, or what is the map's theme. And so we know, with looking at it, the creators were interested in emphasizing the canals and the roads, and then there's a chart at the lower end of the map identifying the distances between locality. And they're going to emphasize stage and steamboat routes too. So this can be rather helpful for someone who is researching ancestors who moved across the state in 1850. So the map titles were often prominently displayed in the 18th century and 17th century. It was not uncommon for map publishers to place a title in this wonderfully embellished cartouche. The map title would be in this cartouche that would have this elaborate decorative motif, and the images that created that cartouche would be telling a story about a colony or a region too. In the 19th century, you find many maps with this kind of title where the letters are very large. Again, the largest text on a map is probably going to be the title. But they do oftentimes convey to you, the user, what is the theme. So always look for the title, and it's, as I said, it probably can't miss it because it probably contains the largest text on the map. Well, what about the creator? You can find this information in a couple of different places on a map. So, oftentimes the name of the creator is below the title, but it can also be below the neat line. And as I mentioned, the neat line is here. And so you want to be careful to, when you're looking for the creator, just remember, you may have to look a couple of different places to find out just who the creator of the map was. In this instance, we know, as noted right here, that it was published by Thomas Cowperthwaite and Company. And in 1850, they were located at 253 Market Street in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And of course, Philadelphia was one of the major publishing cities in America at that time. So that's not surprising at all. Philadelphia was a major publication hub. And this company, Thomas and Cowperthwaite, were responsible for publishing this map. The creator can include not only the name of the publishing company, it can also include the name of the cartographer, the name of the surveyor, the name of the engraver, the publisher, and also the printer. So the creator information can include, possibly include, or could be the publishing company's name, the surveyor who drew the map, their name, the person who engraved it. Perhaps it's including the name of the engraver and the surveyor and the publisher. I've seen it happen. So the creator information can be important, and it gives you, you know who made it, and if you know anything about that person, you might understand why they created that map. So the legend is important because the legend explains what information is highlighted on the map, and it also identifies the symbols that are used on the map. So, for example, you know that canals on this beautiful map are going to be noted with the black line. Railroads are noted, it looks like, with two lines with the dots in between those two lines and then highlighted in what looks like orange to me. And then, of course, there's a, let's see if I can move this over here. The capital section, the capitals are noted by this nifty circle symbol that looks like a wheel. And then what also is interesting is that they also identify the land distances from town to town with this particular symbol. So it's always helpful for you, the viewer, for you, the researcher, to review the explanations, the legend. And the legend may also include, not always, but the legend may also include a title, a date, name of the map maker. The legend may also include the copyright statement, and it may include a reference numbers or a series of numbers that link a map to a specific publication. And when I say this, I'm thinking of government publication maps published by the state or federal governments. There may be information in the legend linking them to a report or a series of reports. And oftentimes the legend will also identify what symbols are used to show waterways, topographic information. And just keep in mind as you look at this that these maps are drawn at a scale. They are not drawn at life-size scale. Clearly, if you drew a map 1 inch equals, on the map equals 1 inch in real life, that's going to be an awfully large map. And so it is always helpful to remember and to also know what the scale is. And the scale is this right here. The scale helps to explain what is being shown on the map, what real life information, how is it being displayed on the map. And let me see if I can go back to the previous screen here so you can get a better view of the scale. There we go. The scale of miles is down here towards the bottom. And when you're reviewing maps, it's always very helpful to know if it's a scale of miles, if it's a scale of nautical miles. It may be a scale of feet. And what you can do in an instance like this where you have a bar, you can actually take your ruler and you can figure out where the 1 inch is here. and let's say 1 inch equals 20 miles, then you know on this map, 1 inch on the map equals 20 miles on the ground. And so that gives you a perspective of what kind of information or how much information is being shown. And what you'll find in catalog records for maps frequently is the scale will be given in a fraction, or 1 inch equals 24,000 inches on the ground, or 1 inch equals 250,000 inches on the ground. And that's there to help you give, so that you know how the real life information is being shown on that particular map. Just going to go back to where we were. Awesome. The next page. And I apologize. My PowerPoint, for some reason, wants to go ahead of me. So here we go. So again, here's a legend. It may not say it's a legend. It may be identified as an explanation, but this is an important section to check when you're researching. And again, make sure you know what the scale is too, so you are familiar with and know how the real life information is being shown on the map. All right, now, and here we go. Excellent example of creator information. Another place where you can find this is here in the copyright section. Many maps show this information below the neat line. Thomas Cowperthwaite and Company hold the copyright for this map, and they obtained it in the office of the District Court of the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. And when you're looking at it, it's also helpful to know how the map is oriented, and many maps will use a compass rose. And as you can see down on the lower right, there's an example of 3 compass roses that you might find, and they'll be oriented in the direction in which the map is oriented. And many maps are oriented north, and the compass rose will indicate that, and oftentimes it'll be pointing, and then you'll see north written above the arrow that's used, or the symbol that's used to indicate the direction for north. It's normally very easily identified and easily read. Other helpful information to look at is, what is the longitude and latitude? And the border is where you're going to find this information, longitude and latitude. A lot of maps were created based on the Mercator projection, or they were using longitude and latitude. So it's helpful to know where the longitude and latitude is listed. And it's also helpful to know what is the basis for the longitude information. Is the longitude based out of Greenwich? Is the longitude based on Paris, France, or is it Washington, District of Columbia? That is helpful information that you need to know. And if you can figure out the longitude and latitude, then if, like, for example, you know the longitude and latitude for a place that you're researching, that can help you pinpoint where that place may have been on a map. So helpful information for you to keep in mind as you're using a map in your genealogical research. And then the date. The date can be very important. There can be multiple dates on a map. And yes, there can be multiple dates on a map. Do not let this dissuade you in any way. Do not be, don't be flummoxed by this. There are ways to figure out what is the date of the map you're looking at. The date that you see in the title is oftentimes the date that is being reflected. It's the date, it's the year in which the map is related. It's the year the map was made, and therefore the information on the map reflects the date of 1850. The copyright date might be a different date. The map may have been created in 1850, but perhaps Thomas and Cowperthwaite and Company didn't get the copyright until 1852. So the copyright may be 1852. The publication date may be 1852, but the map is reflective of information known and mapped in 1850. So good things to keep in mind, good information to keep in mind. And maps can be published in successive years. Perhaps it was created in 1850. It may be such a good map that they continue to publish it 1855, 1860, 1865. And so if it's included in an atlas, you may need to look at the date of the atlas to find out what the publication year is. But the date on the map may be a little different from the publication date of the atlas. And for those of you who are researching in the 20th century and you are using road maps to try to figure out which direction and where your family went, road map publishers used a complex system of date codes that represented the date on the map and subsequent revisions. So these can be very tricky. So there is a website that you can go to called the Road Map Collectors Association. And apparently this website, the Road Map Collectors Association, can help you figure out what is the exact date of the map you're looking at. And for those of you who use USGS topographical maps, and I hope most of you here do, if you're not, you really should be, especially if you're researching 19th and 20th century America. The dates on topographic maps are often in the lower left-hand corner. And for these guys, there's a date of creation, and there's also going to be a revision date. So you need to see the revision date. That's very important. You can find two dates on a topographic map. So that's a lot of information. You need to, when you're looking at a map, you need to figure out what the title is. You need to figure out who the creator is and where to go. The longitude and latitude. The legend or explanation. And of course, also look at the other notes that may be written on a map. It's not uncommon to find notes written on maps, especially those published in the 18th century, where the map maker may not have had information, I mean, as far as actual plats and survey records, but they may have had anecdotal information in written form from folks who have explored a region, and they may put that they might write that anecdotal information down on a map. So don't discard the written messages or the written notes that are on a map. They can be very, very helpful to you. Very helpful to you. So let's take a look at what maps are available for research. And this section is going to be split up. I'm going to go through nautical charts and U.S. Coast surveys today. And then next week, I hope you can join us next week because we will pick back up and begin looking at additional maps that you can use in your research. So it's 10:35, and this is supposed to go through 11 or a little after 11. So I'm going to take a quick drink from my coffee mug. It's very good and still hot. And so let's continue. Government issued maps. Maps to use in genealogical research. We are going to look at government produced maps today. And then next week, we are going to pick up with aeronautical charts and look at commercially produced maps. So For the rest of the session, let's take a look at government-produced maps that you can use in your genealogical research. And if there are those of you who are interested in historical research, these can help you out as well. So let's start. Military maps. What information can you find on military maps? And for this session, we're focusing on Revolutionary War and Civil War maps. There's also the War of 1812, and then there are, of course, the numerous Indian wars that were fought. Those took place out west. For the purposes of this session, we're focusing on Civil War and Revolutionary War maps. So what information can you find on Revolutionary War maps? What information can you find on Civil War maps? You may be surprised at what you can find regarding a region, an area of a locality. And the map that you see on the screen right now was completed by the French in 1781. It is a manuscript map. It depicts the Battle of Green Spring Plantation in 1781. Green Springs plantation was where one of the 17th century governors of Virginia, Governor Berkeley, lived. And this map, completed by the French, shows topographical information and cultural information. It is written in French, so please keep that in mind. The legend is in French, and of course explains what the different letters represent. But on a map like this and on other military maps, you can oftentimes see where fortifications were located. There may have been fortifications on your ancestors' land. Just keep that in mind. There may have been fortifications on your ancestors' land. You can see where troop movements occurred, where there may have been mills, where plantations or farms are located, peach orchards, taverns, apple orchards. Oftentimes these maps will show where landowners lived, will identify property boundaries, and in Civil War maps, they will oftentimes show railroads, turnpike roads. On both Civil War and Revolutionary War, these military maps can identify streams and creeks, awesome landscape information, where footpaths were located, where bridle paths were located, where the main horse trails were located. And I'm going to flip to the next screen because it shows you a zoomed in look on this particular map. And as you can see, it identifies the location of Mr. Humbler's plantation along a creek that's coming off of the James River. And then Mr. Harris's house is located just to the east of Mr. Humbler, and Mr. Humbler lives close to Next Land. Well, if you live in Williamsburg or James City County, that should be ringing a bell. Neckaland Road? Yes, that is near Neckaland Road, which comes off of Jamestown Road in good old James City County, Virginia. And yes, if you see the creek here, and the wetlands surrounding it, if you're wondering if that area floods today, yes, it does. And of course, the English camp is noted above Mr. Humbler's plantation, and if you look, Mr. Humbler's plantation has quite a few buildings on it, and just above the English camp is a road where there's a local church, and then you can see other neighbors nearby, and then you can see additional topographic information here where there's a stand of trees, and then here's other information shown by Hatcher, not contour lines, but Hatchers to show some sort of elevation or perhaps wetlands present in the region. And then, oh, look over here, the compass rose or the arrow from the compass rose indicating that the map is oriented north. So this is from 1781. And for those who are interested in visiting Green Springs Plantation, it is now a national park, a service area off of Centerville Road, so in Williamsburg, James City County, Virginia. Okay, let's take a look at another Revolutionary War map. Again, this is French, and it's more of a regional map, but if you live in Tidewater, Virginia, it shows you the location and place names in use. Williamsburg, it's right there. Can't miss it. And then you can see the roads leading into Williamsburg. You can also see the creeks coming in from the York River and also from the James River. And then you can see the major road leading from Hampton up the peninsula, up to York County, Yorktown, and then off to Williamsburg. And then down here in the south side area, which is present day Norfolk, Virginia Beach, you've got plenty of green of place names being shown. My pointer just froze, and I apologize for that. But you have a lot of place name information, and again, you can see the waterways and the water features that are present. And yes, there is a Pungo Chapel in Pungo. There is North Landing, and for those of you who live in Great Bridge, Chesapeake, indeed, there is Great Bridge listed. Wonderful manuscript map. Simple, but conveys a lot of important information. And this is from the Civil War. This is a sun print, meaning that it was made in the field through a process involving the sun that the Confederates and the Union armies were using to reproduce maps in the field. They would be made by the topographers, like by the cartographers, and then they would be copied in the field so that they could get them into the hands of the officers to help them as they made decisions. Well, this kind of map includes a ton of information. I'm going to bring it in for a close-up. This is from about 1864. All three maps that I've shown so far are available online through the Library of Congress website if you want to go back and take a closer look at them. But this one is dated about 1864, and it was completed by the Chief Engineer's Office of the Department of Northern Virginia, which means it was done by General Lee's topographical engineers. And so as you move into a closer view of it, you can see that, like the Revolutionary War maps, you are viewing topographical detail, trees here, roads shown, the location of properties, and the names of the property owners given. Oh, look at this. A road has been named Quaker Road. And then up here, Prince George Courthouse is noted. So if you're doing research in Prince George County, Virginia, here's the location of the courthouse in 1864. Here are roads leading to it. The Petersburg Stage Road is close to the Prince George Courthouse. And then down here, here's Mount Sinai, which is probably the name of a church. And then as you look around in other areas of the map, you'll see other names listed. And it was not uncommon for topographical engineers for the armies to identify orchards, mills, the location of a shoemaker. Yes, you may find shoemakers in the South. Yes, shoes were being made by, being manufactured up north, but it's not uncommon to find a shoemaker or a shoe cobbler in Virginia before the war or during the Civil War. And look at this, the location of the poorhouse is noted as well. So again, this could be extremely helpful to you if you know that you have ancestors living in the Petersburg area of Virginia in the Civil War. You can identify the roads, the names of roads, and the names of property owners. Sometimes they may name the someone who might be renting a property, but not always. And the information you see, they're using hatchers right here. These are hatchers, little marks here to try to identify height, topography, contour lines. They're not using contour lines here. They're using hatchers. And I'm going to show you what a contour line is in a few minutes. So, and here's the name of a railroad. You have just found out a ton of cultural information about this area as it was in 1864. So I'm going to take another sip of coffee here. Let's move on to the next screen. Military maps continued. So the symbols used on military maps will vary. If a useful tip is this, check the legend if one is available. Have a magnifying glass with you, because sometimes the engineers, the topographical engineers, are trying to put a lot of information on the map, and and because of this, have a magnifying glass with you. It'll make it easier to read the names. And remember, the relief will most likely be shown by the hatcher marks I just showed you and not contour lines. And then, of course, keep in mind that a number of the topographical engineers who were making maps in the American Civil War were trained at West Point and at Annapolis. And when you're reviewing Revolutionary War maps, the best maps were made by the French engineers. The worst maps were made by the Hessian and Spanish engineers. And of course, I have to say this, Yorktown is overrepresented in Revolutionary War maps. My opinion only does not reflect the opinion of the Library of Virginia. So you can use these maps. These maps can help you determine the location of an ancestor's home or property, the waterways in use, the roads in use, and I emphasize waterways because in the 18th century and early 19th century, Virginians were using their waterways to travel around the Commonwealth. It's very important. It was a very important mode of transportation. Just to give you an idea of how important it was, even in 1907, when the Jamestown Exposition was held in Norfolk, people were using the waterways to get there, using boats to travel to the Jamestown Exposition. So yes, the waterways have been an important transportation routes in Virginia for a very long time. With the development of the interstate system and the road system in Virginia, this has changed. But up through the early part of the 20th century, yes, using the waterways to travel was definitely an important mode of transportation. These maps can also help you find the location of county courthouses, especially Civil War maps. You can find important cultural information, and also it may help you identify the type of employment available in that particular area at that time in history. So, and before we move on to topographic maps, I have to put in a shout out for a Christopher Cole's Road Atlas published in 1789. The Cole's Atlas can be very helpful to folks researching Virginia during the Revolutionary War. He published this fantastic road atlas in 1789, and the Virginia section is based on information completed by Washington's topographical engineers during the Revolutionary War. So when you're looking at Cole's Atlas, it may have been published in 1789, but the information reflects Virginia during the American Revolutionary War. And the great news is that Cole's Atlas, C-O-L-L-E-S, is available for you to research through the Library of Congress website. So that's the great news. It is available for you to research. So topographic maps. Topographic maps it has been determined by someone, not me, that there are over 800 uses for topographic maps. That's right, over 800 uses. So yes, topographic maps are used by genealogists, historians, surveyors, land plan users, engineers, city planners, you name it. They're used by pretty much everyone. And so what can you find on topographic maps? Well, in the United States, the United States Geological Survey did not begin creating topographic maps until the late 1870s. And the first topographic maps of Virginia were finished around 1879, 1880. The bulk of them were made in the 20th century. So they provide, obviously, topographic information, the location of shorelines, water features, streams and canals, vegetation, wooded areas, the dimensions of hills and mountains, location of valleys, roads, route numbers, schools, churches, public buildings, boundary lines, political boundary lines, land grants, and that's mainly for Western states, and it can even show fence lines, and that's particularly true in the Western states. This is the Reedsville quadrangle that you're seeing on the PowerPoint right now. It is of an area in the northern neck of Virginia, and it's dated 1981 or 1987. And this is topographic maps are the ones that you'll often find two dates for, and the dates are going to be listed below the map in this collar section. And you'll see the original date of publication, and then you'll oftentimes see the revised date. And the revision date means that the information was checked in the field. Actually, someone actually walked around on the ground to make sure the information was correct. And then oftentimes you'll find that it'll say photo revised and then give you the year photo revision. Well, in this instance, it wasn't field checked, but they used satellite imagery, photographs from satellite imagery or from airplanes to update the information on the map. So it was photo revised in 1987, either from aerial photographs, most likely aerial photographs, and today it could very well be updated through the use of satellite imagery. So just keep that in mind. So symbols used. You can find over 20 symbols used on a topographic map. Does that mean that there will be a legend on the topographic map showing you what those symbols are? No, not necessarily. So I found it very helpful to go online. TopoZone has provided topographic map legend and symbols that you can download. That's what I did. TopoZone, this is where I found this helpful handy cheat sheet. The information you see here comes from a publication we have in the Library of Virginia that identifies topographic symbols. When I'm looking at a topographic map, I find it very helpful to have this or this out so that I can understand what the symbols represent. And as you can see, there's a lot. And I can tell you that blue is often used to show water. Brown shows relief. So anytime you see a contour line, it's probably going to be in brown. Black shows cultural or human information, like a house or a building might be shown with a black dot. So, and then if you look over here on this side, let me get that red pointer out. Topographic map symbols are listed here. And this one even shows symbols for dams, quarries, foreshore flat, rock, bare, or a wash. So wonderful information that you may find on a topographic map. So useful tips when you're using topographic maps. Check the dates. The quadrangle may have gone through several revisions. The relief will be shown by contour lines. And contour lines, they're contour lines. They're basically in circles, and they're used to show the height of a topographic area. If you live in the mountains and you've used topographic maps of your areas where there's a lot of mountains, you'll notice that the contour lines indicate the height as you go up a mountain or as you're walking through an area of land. Know the name of the quadrangle. The topographic maps are done in, they cover a very small area. For example, many of the 7.5-minute series topographic maps that you find or will use today, the 7.5-minute series, 1 inch on the map equals 24 inches on the ground, 24,000 inches on the ground, not 24, 24,000. And so you can get a lot of up close and personal information. Other maps are not going to provide that up close and in-depth personal information. The map that we looked at from 1850 is not at a 1 inch equals 24,000 inches on the ground map. That is a much, it covers an inch is going to cover a lot more than 24,000 inches. And so a large scale map like the one we were just looking at, it covers a specific area. And what's nifty about topographical maps is the quadrangle name is going to be up here at the top. And then oftentimes the next quadrangle in the series is going to be listed on this side, or the quadrangle below this one is going to be named here. So you could set the quadrangle sheet side by side to get a very complete map. The Commonwealth of Virginia has been mapped. And the Commonwealth of Virginia, so if you wanted to put all the quadrangles together, you could. I don't know if you have enough space in your house to do that, but you could do that to get a complete topographical picture of the Commonwealth of Virginia. So it is 10:58. So how are topographic maps helpful? They help you to identify changes that have taken place over an area over time. I mean, if you live in the Washington, D.C. area or in Northern Virginia, the topographic maps produced for 2019 are going to be very different for those that were published in 1919. And you can basically see the development of an area through the use of topographical maps. You can also see urban development take place throughout time. Again, Northern Virginia is an excellent example. What Fairfax County looks like in 1919 is very different from what it looks like in 2019. And you can use these topographic maps to trace the changes taking place. They help you locate courthouses, towns, railroad depot. There are over 800 uses for a topographical map. And of course, they'll help you identify employment in an area, explain why your family or ancestors may have lived in a region. It's because of or what their employment was because of the region's natural resources. So, nautical and U.S. Coast Survey charts. Nautical charts are private charts made by private companies. I put them together with Coast Survey charts because it just made more sense to put them together. And so nautical charts are not, they're like Coast Survey charts. It's just that they're published by private entities or could just be another name for Coast Survey chart. The nautical charts tend to be focused on the Atlantic Ocean moving into the Chesapeake Bay. And nautical charts are helpful for people who live within, whose ancestors may have lived within 3 miles to within a half mile of a shoreline. This is not something that you want to use if you're trying to research someone who's living in Crozet, Virginia. I mean, these are basically coastline charts, nautical charts of rivers and creeks flowing into major bodies of water that flow into the Atlantic Ocean or on the west coast into the Pacific Ocean. But they can identify the names of rivers and creeks, provide soundings, identify the location of roads and leading up to or that stop at the shoreline, farmsteads, the names of landowners, give you an idea of the topography and use at a particular time. So within that very specific area, they can provide fairly good information. And for those of you who are researching 18th century Virginia, In particular, the nautical charts available from the 18th century can tell you where tobacco warehouses and plantations were located. And early nautical charts from the 17th century and 18th century can also provide the names of settlements, the place names in use at that particular time. And so, again, both nautical and U.S. Coast Survey charts can provide very important information, but within a very specific area. So as you use them, here's an example of a nautical chart from 1776. You can see the soundings up the York River and also in the James River. James River being here, York River being here, soundings and depths, and then a number of place names present, and the names of plantations or plantation owners, and the creeks, Mulberry Island, for example, which is in present day Newport News, present day Fort Eustis. Again, a wealth of cultural information that may assist you in your researches. And then here is a U.S. Coast Survey chart of San Francisco from about 1853, 1855. This is gorgeous. Not only is it providing you topographic information, like here we go, this is an excellent example of what contour lines look like. Here we go, contour lines in use right here, and then here's the height listed right here. And then of course the streets and the black dots indicating the location of businesses and homes and such. And then over here to the other side within the bay, you're getting soundings and depths listed. And of course the names of the wharfs. So again, very helpful information, but in a specific limited area. And so if you're interested in more, come back next week and we'll look at aeronautical charts, state highway maps, and then of course maps for counties and cities, fire insurance maps, and immigrant maps for immigrants. So thank you for joining us, and that's what I have for this session.
Thank you, Cassandra. We have a couple of questions. The first one is from Robin Comfort. Could you possibly repeat the name of the Eldridge reference you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation?
Which one was that?
The Eldridge reference.
Was it on a particular map?
No, it was on your first slide where you were discussing the different types of things to look out for.
Okay, let's go back to that. I hope I'm not making anyone dizzy. Is it why maps are critical to research?
I think so. Robin, if you could drop a note in the chat, that would be helpful. It's the 18th and 19th century migration.
Okay.
Eldridge.
Let's see here. Oh, Carrie Eldridge, thank you. I'm sorry, Robin. It took my brain a minute to process that. I apologize. Carrie Eldridge, Eldridge. Carrie Eldridge. And she has a neat group of atlases that helps to identify and focuses on migration trails.
All right. Our second question comes from Julian Lee, and it's, do the colonial/states have copies of all the maps related to their regions, or should researchers also look for maps of those places with European archives, i.e. Britain, France, Spain, etc.?
Yes, so the answer to that question is yes. Yes, because especially, for example, in 17th century Virginia, you do have a number of maps where there's quite possible that maps were created in the colony and then sent back by the governors to the Board of Trade and Plantations or to the other boards overseeing the colonies. So yes, I would definitely check the United Kingdom archives that would be an excellent repository. And the French archives would be an excellent source as well. It's amazing what they have. And the French were fantastic surveyors. Especially they did the best job of mapping the Louisiana area, the midsection of America in the 18th century. So absolutely check them out. Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Does anyone have any other questions before we let Cassandra go? Please put them in the question section or in the chat box. You're just getting wonderful praise. You're getting thank yous, some excellent webinars. Thank you so much. You're getting plenty of those.
Come back next week.
Come back next week. That is totally, completely true. Please sign up for part 2 of Cassandra's workshop that's on July 31st at 10. If there are no other questions, we're going to sign. Oh, hold on, there's one more.
Okay.
This one is from Thomas Sander. He asked, are many of the maps available on the LVA website?
Oh, excellent question, Tom. We have put up a number of maps on our website. If you go to Virginia Memory, and if you attend next week, I have a list of places to visit, to go, to get maps. We do have several colonial maps of Virginia on our website. We also have state maps of Virginia. We are in the process of maps that have been cataloged already. We're in the process of identifying them, getting them scanned, and then putting them up. We are waiting for our new digital management system to be made available called Rosetta. And when that occurs, I will be able to start putting up or uploading more maps into a digital management system. But yes, if you go visit Virginia Memory, we do have a map collection site. And we have it split up by county and city and by different map collections. It is worth checking out, absolutely. And if you are interested in topographic maps, there's something called TopoView. Let me let me get out of this so I can go to that page. And let's see if I can, okay. So TopoView, this is a nifty website to go to review topographic maps. So for these, you don't even have to go to a local public library anymore. You can just go to TopoView to pull up maps, topographic maps. And you can type in the name of the location that you're researching right here. And for example, I was looking up the Reedville topographic map I was showing you. I typed it in. This is the results, and then you can download a GeoPDF if you want to. You can download a JPEG. If you need to access topographic maps, this is an excellent place to go. And then for coast survey charts, I like to use this one. It's a historical map and chart collection. I was, looking earlier to get a firmer date on that San Francisco coast survey chart we were showing. So I searched for San Francisco, and then I will list the nautical charts they have and the year published. And if you want to view the image, you just hit the preview button and it'll bring up the map. So again, the wonderful technological advances that have been made allow you to do a lot of research from home now. But thank you, Tom. And let me show you how to get to our map collection if you are not familiar with that. If you visit the Library of Virginia, and hopefully you should be able to see the Library of Virginia webpage. Okay, I'm going to move this down. What you want to do is you want to click on the phrase Virginia Memory. And then once Virginia Memory appears, there are multiple ways to do this. I'm just showing you how I do it. I always go to collections A to Z. And then I do prefer to go to the M section where you can see the link to map collections. And then once this page appears, it shows what we have. Well, I'm like, I need to break this up because that's 1,942 maps. So what I just do is I go back over to the left side, and you'll see underneath library home and search and results, this line here. I click on this one, the map collections link located in between collections and all map collections. I click on this to get a more or organized and arranged collection and identification of what we have. And the city maps and the county maps that I referenced are here and here. National maps, state maps are listed down here. It is a work in progress. Again, once we have that new system, digital management system in place, I will be putting more maps in here. So that is a long-winded answer to Tom Sanders' question.
I think he'll appreciate your answer. That is all of the questions that we have today, but I want to thank you, Cassandra, for doing this workshop for us, and we will look forward to seeing all of you next week.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Ashley Ramey. I am the Community Outreach Specialist for the Library of Virginia, and thank you for registering for our MAP genealogy workshop today. Our speaker is Cassandra Farrell. She has been employed at the Library of Virginia for 18 years on August 12, 2020. She's the library's senior map archivist and has an eclectic job that focuses on the collection management, collection development, reference, and public relations. Cassandra earned her BA in History in 1996 from Bryan College and earned her MA in History from Old Dominion University in 1999. She worked at Colonial Williamsburg as an adjunct instructor in history at Thomas Nelson Community College and spent one very long year teaching middle school history and English. Currently, Cassandra serves on the board of directors for the Washington Map Society and begins working on her doctoral in history this fall with George Mason University. If you have any questions regarding this webinar, please place your questions in the chat area and we will try to answer them at the end of the webinar. And now I'm turning it over to Cassandra, and thank you.
And thank you, Ashley, and thank you for coming back this week to learn more about maps and genealogical research. And for those of you who weren't able to attend last week but are with us this week, thank you for joining us. And just as a recap, last week we looked at how to read a map, and I believe Ashley's going to be providing the PowerPoint outline to those of you who were not here last week, so you will be able to see that. And we also looked at some government-produced maps, military maps, topographic maps, and we left off, I believe, with topographic maps and what we're going to be doing. Oh, no, we left off with coast survey charts. Forgive me, we did look at those two, nautical charts and coast survey charts. And so what we're going to do today is look at aeronautical charts, postal route maps, look at county and city maps and atlases, immigrant traveler maps, which can be really interesting, and Sanborn fire insurance maps, which those maps are just awesome. So anyway, aeronautical charts. Let's see if I can get to the PowerPoint slide here. There we go. Aeronautical, whoop. And the PowerPoint once again is getting ahead of me. So let's see if I can get it back to where we should be. There we go. So aeronautical charts are definitely 20th century charts, of course, obviously 21st century charts, but they were introduced in the 20th century, and quite frankly, they were made for pilots. And the first aeronautical charts were based on postal route maps. They were produced by Rand McNally, and they were even included in such journals as Aerial Age and the title Flying Magazine. And so Aerial Age Weekly, Flying Magazine is where you would find some of the earliest aeronautical charts. And they provide interesting information where if you're looking at one from the early 20th century, you'll find where airports were located, where abandoned airports were located. You'll see the symbols used for weather purposes. They may provide some topographic information. And if you're looking at those from the mid part of the 20th century forward, they even show the location of power plants, open air theaters, and of course roads. What's interesting about these is that in the early days, the pilots were relying on railroad lines to fly across the country. And so imagine if you're flying across the country and you're looking at a map that shows a railroad that's supposed to be completed, but it's not. That could be a problem. So they needed to make sure that the maps that they were relying upon were accurate. And so that's why they liked, the Army in particular liked its pilots to use postal route maps. But according to Ralph Ehrenberg in his nifty chapter on aeronautical charts in the book Cartographies of Travel and Navigation that was published in 2007, Rand McNally maps were the maps of choice for pilots. And they came up with all kinds of ways to make them readily available for pilots, making them in triptych. For those of you who are familiar with American Automobile Association triptych maps, they would be in that form where you could just go from one triptych to another. And of course, they created various ways in which to protect the maps while you're flying, holders for them, because there were several instances when the pilots would be in the air and a wind gust would come up and poof, the map would be gone. And that could be a problem. So they also, what's also very interesting about aeronautical charts is as the pilots are flying, they would oftentimes rely on imagery on a barn or on a railroad depot that would identify their location. And so as you're flying, in the early days, they're relying on sight. So they're flying over and they're seeing place names and signs on barn roofs and railroad depots to guide them along the way. So they were relying heavily on railroad lines to fly across the state or to fly across the country. And the next image, here we go, is an air navigation map that was published, it looks like by the United States Army around 1923. And it's a close-up of the Virginia Peninsula, Southside Tidewater region, which is where I am from. And you'll notice the legend is they're using symbols to identify Army, Navy, or Marine Corps fields, commercial or municipal fields, where if they need to land, they have some place the pilots can land the plane. Resolving beacons where they're located. And then, of course, there's an explanation of the railroad tracks that they may see, if it's 1, 2, or 3 tracks. And then various symbols to show the location of a city or large town. Circles denote the location of towns or villages. Racetracks, apparently, they like to note where racetracks were located because if you needed to make an emergency landing, a racetrack was a great place to land because the surface was always in good shape. And so, as you can see on this map, there are several small dots going up the Virginia Peninsula. Let me get my pointer out here because you guys can't see me as I'm pointing this way. That makes no sense to you whatsoever. But this To go up, there's a dot locating where Morrison is, and then here's Menchville, and then up here is Denby and Fort Eustis, and as you move further up, there's Lee Hall, and Grove. And these place names, for the most part, are still in use today. And what's many of you might find interesting, especially if you live on the Virginia Peninsula, this is basically the same railroad track that's in use right now, and it parallels Interstate 64. So when you find a good route, you stick to it. And you'll often find that roads, especially present day, interstate roads, state roads, major county roads, are roads that have been in existence, well, dating back to the colonial period, if not longer. And of course, this actually provides some topographical detail because you can see the wetland imagery identifying that this is wetlands areas in what is present day Suffolk County, which would have been known as Nansemond County in 1923. And I mean, this is an example of a map, an aerial map from Washington, D.C. to Hampton, which was reproduced by the U.S. Army. And if you take a look at, and of course, with also with the United States Geological Survey, and then if you go to this next map, this one was actually published in Aerial Age Weekly in 1917, volume 4. And again, it's a map showing the route from Newport News to New York City. And of course, they have New York City listed first because that is definitely the most populous area. And you can see on this side, if you wanted to travel a more straight way, this is the way you could go. And of course, you would have hopefully markers along some of the buildings to help guide you, since there are no railroad lines that run through Gloucester. And then of course, if you chose to travel in another direction, you of course had the railroad line that you could follow as you go up the Virginia Peninsula. And for those of you who have visited Williamsburg, Colonial Williamsburg on a regular basis, these names are familiar names, again, because they're still in use today. And then on the opposite side, you have the map showing the route that could be taken by airplane going from Baltimore up to New York City. And again, you can see some of the place names that are being used, and some of them may look very familiar to you. And this next slide is just a blow up of the Baltimore sheet. And this, of course, is a blow up, a larger image of the Newport News sheet. So when you look at these maps, they do have their uses, but they're more for pilots. If you're a genealogist looking at these aeronautical charts, it's certainly helpful to look at to determine what the transportation routes were at that time, the ones that were being used heavily, and of course, what were the migration patterns for your ancestors if they were traveling across the state or moving across the country in the early 20th century. This could give you an idea of what those patterns may have been. Now, highway maps. Highway maps are definitely 20th century inventions because they were made with the car in mind. And of course, the car was not heavily used until the 20th century. And the first highway maps per se began to be produced around 1899, 1900. The American Automobile Association was publishing maps for its users to use. And we actually have a very nifty one from 1912 that shows the best route to take from Washington, D.C. down into Richmond, Virginia. And it identifies where there are no bridges, and if you're driving across this creek, you may have to drive through the water. This is the best route to take through this area. Do not take this route because the roads are horrible. It's really cool. And they actually produce Rand McNally was producing highway maps early on. You do see some of the oil companies beginning to produce highway maps by 1920. And the state of Virginia began publishing highway maps of the state around 1922. Of course, we have earlier maps from, we actually have one from 1918, where it's a state map, where it's a rough draft version of the state map where they're producing to show highways in Virginia in 1918, which is of course during World War I. But when you look at Virginia highway maps, they're going to show you state and county roads. They're going to show you road conditions and the type of road, mail routes, school bus routes, railroads, ferries, airports. They can show the location of schools and churches and county courthouses. And if you look at the legend, this is interesting. They're using symbols and colors to identify if it's a state highway unimproved, if it's a state highway that's improved with a hard surface, or if it's a state highway that's improved but does not have a hard surface. And then of course they're using just a single black line to indicate the location of a county road that is unimproved, meaning it's a dirt road, and then a county road that has a black line with yellow highlighting that has been improved. And of course, Virginia was in the mud, meaning that in the 20th century, in the early 20th century, most of Virginia's roads were not paved. They were in the mud. They were dirt roads. And by the 1920s, there was a real effort taking place in Virginia to change that. In fact, they were looking to change that during World War II. And so the Virginia Department of Transportation did not take over the care and maintenance of Virginia roads until 1932. So until 1932, the care and maintenance of roads were up to or dependent upon the county and its finances. And when VDOT took over the care and maintenance of primary and secondary roads within the counties, there were only 3 counties that did not cede this over to the state, and one of those was Henrico County, Virginia. So the county maps of primary and secondary highways are from 1932. They can be extremely helpful. This, what you see on the screen right now, is a highway map of Virginia showing the state and county highway system in the year 1922 or 1923. And the legend that you see here is a legend that was shown on the previous PowerPoint page. And as we move forward to the next slide, you can see how there are a number of place names present. And of course, the improved county roads are noted in yellow. And of course, the state maintained roads that have been improved are in red. And so it's not an up close and personal view of a particular county, but it does certainly indicate the roads that could be used by your ancestors in the 20th centuries. And so this is a close-up of one of the county maps from the Atlas of Primary and Secondary Highways that was published by VDOT in 1932. This comes from the Accomack map. The Accomack County is on the eastern shore, and the maps are in black and white. They do not have a lot of color, and you do need to look at the legend to be able to identify what the symbols mean. But as you can see, it's a county map, and it's giving you a lot more up close and personal information that you're not going to see on the state highway map. It's got loads of place names, the location, the names of creeks and local rivers, and of course, these symbols would identify the location of particular buildings. You're going to find churches. Here, back to here's a symbol for churches. Here's the location of a wharf. So if you are trying to get an idea of what a county road system may have looked like in the 1920s, the 1932 Atlas may be of help to you. And the Virginia Department of Transportation continues to publish primary maps of the primary and secondary highway systems within a county. And the atlases that were published, we have an atlas form from 1932 up until about the year 1971. They were not published every single year, But if you are trying to research a county's road system and its road use, this could be an excellent atlas series to look at, because it's going to show you the changes that are taking place at the county level. And of course, if you need a county map today of the secondary and highway systems in use, the Virginia Department of Transportation still provides those for Virginians and for others who really do need them or just want them. So can they be extremely helpful in genealogical research? Yes, particularly for those of you who are researching ancestors who were living in a Virginia county in the 20th century. And they can show you how routes changed, where they may have been going in one direction one year, and then VDOT made changes for a variety of reasons, and you can see those changes in an atlas published a few years later. Of course, they are fantastic visuals of how families and individuals moved across the county or moved across the state, and so they can be very, very helpful. These are not only used by genealogists, but by urban planners, by archaeologists, you name it. These maps, like topographical maps, have a lot of uses and a lot of users. So postal route maps, that they are what they are named, postal route maps. And it's specifically designed to identify postal routes. So they're going to be focusing on railroad lines because mail was delivered by rail. They're going to be showing railroad stations. They're going to be showing the major roads in use, where post offices were located. They may even identify where post offices are no longer in service. They're going to identify political boundaries within a state, and obviously they're going to show boundary lines between states. And there's a very nifty legend in many cases explaining mail service, meaning this line indicates that its mail service is 2 times a week or 5 times a week. And when you're looking at them, some useful tips for them is the emphasis is on railroad stations and post offices. It's not going to identify road conditions. They don't really provide topographical detail. So if you want to know if this area was that your ancestors lived in was a marsh or a wetland, this really isn't going to answer that question. Or did your family live in a hollow, or did they live on top of a mountain? This map is probably not going to answer that particular question, but it will identify the post offices in use. And for a number of researchers, sometimes that is the closest they can get to finding out where their ancestors lived, is by knowing the post office name. And so if you know that, you can go see where it's located, and that will help give you an idea of the general vicinity of where your family lived. You can use these in a variety of ways. Find old roads and railroads that are no longer in use. You can determine what travel routes were for Virginians and for others who are traveling across the Commonwealth. You can also use these to determine migration routes. And the postal route maps date back, actually, the United States government started publishing these, well, not the United States government. Map makers and map publishers began publishing maps that show postal routes as early as the 1790s. So the genre of postal route maps date back to the late 18th century, continue through the 19th century and into the 20th century. And they can be very, very helpful. And here's an example of one. This is courtesy of the Library of Congress. So if you wanted to take a look at this, you can visit the Library of Congress's website today and take a good look at it, and you'll be able to zoom in. This is from about the year 1896, I believe. It's a late 19th century post route map of the states of Virginia and West Virginia. And the legend is, it's an explanation of mail service. Again, lines and coloring are used, and some symbols are used to provide necessary information. Railroads have a straight line with hatches through them. If it's a solid black line, you get mail delivery at this post office 6 times a week. Otherwise, it might be 3 times a week if the line is a little thicker. And then if it's yellow, there's mail service twice a week. Offices discontinued are indicated by this symbol. And then, of course, they have notations for the beginning of a route and for the end of a route. And as you can see on the map behind the explanation of services, you can see, location of a town, and then, of course, a railroad line here, and then other places where there were post offices were located. So, county and state maps. I'm going to take a sip of coffee here. County and state maps. You can find county maps and state maps in independent sheets, meaning that they were not attached to an atlas. You can also find many that were included in atlases. In fact, it was very, very common in the 19th century and 20th century to find counties in an atlas for a state. And then, of course, you can find a state map in an atlas for the United States. So it is not uncommon at all to find county maps and state maps either bound in an atlas or published separately as an individual sheet. And of course, the county maps, the state maps, are state maps. They identify counties. They're going to use symbols to identify the location of a town. County seats are going to be noted, as are roads and trails used. And trails can be, a trail could be a bridle path. It could be a turnpike road. Well, maybe not a turnpike road, but you get the gist of it. They're going to show railroads and railroad stations, and of course, rivers and canals, especially in the 19th century, because in states like Virginia, where the creeks and the inlets and the rivers comprise so much of the state, they are an important part of the state's transportation network. And for example, the James River and Kanawha Canal extended from Richmond into the western sections of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And of course, early in the 19th century, Virginians hoped to connect Richmond with the Ohio River. That did not occur, obviously, but they did want to connect the Ohio River with Richmond by canal so that Virginia could benefit from the trade and food products coming in from the Midwest, so that New York City wouldn't enjoy all of the profits and benefits of that. But on county maps, you can find city boundaries, you can find the names of streets. They will show you the location of government buildings and local businesses, churches, cemeteries, landowners, and plats of land. And in Virginia, the first county maps were published. Well, they weren't published, they were manuscript maps, which were introduced around 1819 to 1825. And this is really when the counties in Virginia were first truly mapped on an organized level. And so you're really not going to find a county map per se of a Virginia county until really about 1819. And that's because the state of Virginia became engaged in, they wanted to develop the state's transportation system. So they created the Board of Public Works Agency to oversee the construction of roads and canals and turnpikes within the Commonwealth. And so they began mapping the counties, and each county that was around at that time or existed was mapped, and those maps were eventually used to create the state map of Virginia that was published in 1826, and it was sanctioned by the Virginia General Assembly and supported by the Virginia General Assembly. So there were other county maps made in the 1850s, but the South, just in general, county maps were not prolific. Publishers weren't publishing a lot of county maps. But after the Civil War, this does change a little bit. In the mid-1880s, there were atlases of several Virginia counties that were published. And these county atlases, they were for Frederick County, Augusta County, Shenandoah and Page counties, and I believe Rockingham County. They were atlases specifically printed for these counties. And these are wonderful atlases. They provide the location of city boundaries, street names, location of government buildings, local businesses, churches, cemeteries, where landowners lived, and plats of land. For the city of Richmond in particular, atlases that can be of use is the Beers Atlas, dated 1876, and the Based Atlas that was published in 1889. And these two maps, these atlases, the Based and the Beers Atlases, are very similar to the Sanborn maps that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But these county atlases can be extremely helpful. And here are excerpts from a couple here. For instance, they provide the names of institutions and businesses. The Institution for the Deaf, Dumb, and Blind of the state of Virginia was located in Stanton in Augusta County. Of course, this section over here shows you where a fertilizer factory was located. And then, of course, you are not only seeing the road system in use, the railroad lines in use, but you're seeing the names of landowners too. And of course, behind that is an excerpt from a close-up of a town in use, and it's got streets, and it's showing lots, and it's providing the lot numbers, and it's showing that there are structures on that particular lot. So these can be very, very nifty. And bonus material that you might find in county atlases, or even atlases for a state, they can provide business listings, advertisements, panoramic and bird's eye views of cities. They can provide views of buildings and individual properties. And you can see over here examples of this. The residence of Dr. Halderman is here. And then below that, you can see the residence of R.R. Merrick. These were included in county atlases. And oftentimes they'll list the names of subscribers for that atlas at the end. I was looking at the atlas for Rockingham County yesterday, and it listed the subscribers, and it listed their name, it listed the date that they had moved to the county, and it also identified which county or state or country of origin. So they can be extremely helpful. Oh, and they even include the occupation. And I noticed that on the Rockingham County Atlas as well. For those of you who are interested in using these atlases that were published in the mid-1880s, the best place to access them is a database to which we subscribe, Historic Mapworks. Historic Mapworks, and I can take you to that after the PowerPoint presentation. And if you are a Library of Virginia library card holder, that is something that you can access remotely from your own home. So, and if I'm remembering correctly, the atlases that you will find from 1885 in this database include the Rockingham County Atlas, the Atlas for Shenandoah and Page counties, that's one atlas, Augusta County, and Frederick County, Virginia. So, symbols used on county maps and state maps, they're going to be using simple lines to show boundaries, political boundaries, maybe division boundaries within a county. Roads are often double-lined. Railroads are usually bold with dashes or cross-hatched lines. And cities and towns are denoted with dots of various sizes. And when you're using these maps, Know which state is being represented. Pay attention to the symbols being used. And also note the longitude and latitude. If that is provided on an atlas, within a county atlas or within a state atlas, and you find, especially on a county map, in one of the county atlases, you find the location of your ancestors, note the longitude and latitude, because that can help you in trying to determine where their location is, or where their house is located on a present day map. And if you find a landowner's name on a county map, and county maps were published as independent sheets in the late 19th century too. If you find a landowner listed in one of the county atlases or on a sheet of an independent county, what you may want to do then is cross-reference that information with a city directory or a county directory, census information, to get a clear picture of where they're living and what their occupation may have been. Now, if they were a subscriber to a county atlas, that may be located at the end of the atlas in the subscriber section. But if not, certainly check county directories, city directories if they exist, and tax returns. For example, in Virginia, we do have land tax records and property tax records. Yeah, those are some other materials that you can use as cross-references for any information that you might find on a particular map. Okay, so next screen. Here we go. This is a map of Robeson County, North Carolina. It's an example of a single sheet map produced. It was not included in an atlas, but it was produced as a single sheet. And I'm including this because it provides information that a friend of mine was using when she was researching her own family. And ironically, my father's family comes from Robeson County. And if you look in the area near Lumberton, you'll see a number of individuals with the last name of Britt. Well, that is my maiden name. And so I instantaneously knew, as I looked at the map, that that's where some of my father's family was living, is near outside Lumberton. And there were several people with the last name of Britt living in the area. Well, my friend, she was researching in Robeson County because she had an ancestor who had been born in Bland County, Virginia, born in Point Pleasant in Bland County, raised there, born there in 1848, but he died in Alma in Robeson County, North Carolina in 1898. And she was trying to research why in the world he moved from Bland County to Robeson County. And so she found this map of Robeson County in the North Carolina State Archives. So yes, this map is online. And she didn't know which town he lived near, or the town of Alma. I mean, she knew the name of Alma, but she didn't quite know its location. Well, she found it. And then when she found it, she also found the name of McRae appearing. And I'm going to scoot over to this map right here. She found the McRae surname popping up. And of course, that immediately was a significant clue for her, because her great-grandfather, James Fairfax Payne, had married someone named Emily McRae in 1874. And they had given a number of their children the middle name of McRae in honor of their heritage. And so by using this map in her genealogical research, she was able to draw a conclusion that one of the reasons why her grandfather moved to Robeson County was to be near his wife's family, because that's where she was from. And so because the family used the McRae surname, and because she knew the name of the wife of her ancestor, she was able to draw this conclusion based on information on the map. So when you're looking at these maps, you can determine how your ancestors were moving across the county, which roads they would have been using, the place names in use at that time. And if you're looking at county maps and state maps from the 19th century, they can be very helpful in showing how county lines changed. Because in Virginia, counties were being created up until the American Civil War, and I think maybe one or two were created after the American Civil War. But the state maps can show you counties and the progression of counties being made in Virginia. And if you have someone who's lived in a particular area, it's helpful to know county boundary changes because they may be living in one county or township in 1825. By 1840, that county, well, that township may be in a new county. And then in 1870, that township may have a new name. And so by using maps, you can identify those changes in names, basically it changes in political information. And so that would explain why you can find them in this county in 1825, but not in 1840 or in 1817. Well, it's because the county's name changed, or that section of land became a part of a new county, or the township name changed. And so maps can help identify important information and help give you a clue as to where to look for information, which county to look for information. And so they can help you in that regards. And plus, they're just great cultural information. They give you a view of the county or the state that your ancestor was living at that time. And so, immigrant, traveler, and railroad maps. This particular one was published by Phelps around 1850. It is available. There is a copy, not this particular copy, but there is a copy available for you to research on the Library of Congress website. And these are focusing on travel, emphasizing a nation or a state's transportation network. And they were published throughout the 19th century. And of course, you still see traveler maps in the 20th century, but they're just known by a different name. And they are going to show counties, provide you county names, towns listed along a major transportation network, and that major transportation network could be a road, could be a wagon road if it's a map, well, a 19th century map. Trails too, depending upon where you are traveling in the nation at that time. They have been known to show where rivers are located, canals, where mines were located, where they were major areas of mineral resources, ports if you're traveling through a territory, or if you're not traveling through a territory, farms and provisioning stations for those who are traveling west. And these were published, and please keep this in mind as you use these maps. These immigrant, traveler, and railroad maps tended to be published by speculators, land speculators, railroad companies, steamboat companies, local businesses, municipal and state governments who were interested in attracting people to move to their area, their region, their state, their city, their town. So keep that in mind. Who's publishing the map? Land speculators, railroad companies, steamboat companies, local businesses, municipal and state governments. So they may embellish information or maybe not include information about their locality because they're trying to encourage you to come there. So they might provide a glowing review of the area without providing some helpful, truthful tips of information that your ancestors may need to have known but didn't know because it wasn't advertised. So what's nifty about these is they show where settlers were encouraged to go. They oftentimes publish steamboat routes, railroad routes, and the timetables, which could be very helpful. Census data, business listings for a particular area, advertisements, which can be fun to look at, and then illustrations of cities, buildings, and important sites. And they oftentimes can provide written descriptions of towns, natural resources in an area, and the surrounding landscape. And what we have as an example on the PowerPoint is an advertisement for the Burlington. What is the complete name of this? Let me see if I can move this down so I can read the entire name here. The Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad. And so it's, move this around. It provides items of information, the cost of traveling from Omaha to San Francisco, and the number of parties and how much it would cost for each party to travel from Omaha to San Francisco. And then there's information for immigrants on the other side or below it, but it's on the other side on the PowerPoint. It identifies first class accommodations, second class accommodations, a brief description of the accommodations themselves. So they can not only help you figure out migration routes or why your ancestors may have ended up in a certain spot, because as people traveled across the country, sometimes they ended up, their end destination may have been Seattle, but they ended up in the middle part of the country because of a family emergency, or they found work, or they found there was a reason that they needed to stop. And what's nifty about these is that they can identify what the routes were and why people were using these routes, and help explain why your ancestor settled in a city or town or region that they settled in. It's because that's where the transportation routes were located. So they can be helpful. They can also be helpful to historians because of the cultural information that they provide. Since they were used for marketing tools, please keep in mind that the information on them, the information provided, may be overstated. So just keep that in mind as you look at immigrant, traveler, and railroad maps. So how do you use these maps? And I'm going to see if I can't move the PowerPoint display. Looks like it's freezing up again. Okay. And once again, it's moving ahead of me. So as you look at these, they were considered to be marketing tools to convince people to move to an area. So some of the information may be overstated. They were known for showing railroad lines that were incomplete or projected. So keep that in mind. They may show a projected railroad line that was never built or was never completed. And as you look at them, you can identify, again, how your ancestors traveled, why they may have moved to a region or city, and they can also help you identify what types of jobs were available in that area, and that might explain the occupation that your ancestor had. And just in general, you get an idea of what life was like for your ancestor at that particular time in American history. And so the bounty of resources and opportunities can be overstated. Roads and railroads were projected on the map, may not actually have been constructed. And of course, settlers made multiple stops. And again, they may have intended to move to a city in the West, but ended up settling in the Midwest for a variety of reasons: death in the family, birth of a child. Life continued for settlers as they moved, as they migrated across the country. Maybe they didn't have enough money to make it further west, so they had to settle in an area to make more money before they moved west. So there may be records for your ancestors along the way if their travel west took longer than originally intended because of life, because life does happen, as we all know. So, fire insurance maps. Fire insurance maps became quite popular after the American Civil War. I wonder why. And they were created for insurance assessment purposes. Insurance companies, after the Civil War, found that it was too expensive and too time-consuming to create these maps themselves, and so an industry emerged that focused specifically on that. Companies that mapped counties for insurance purposes. And the best known set of maps, best set of fire insurance maps available were known as the Sanborn Fire Insurance Maps. Hands down, best known, best set of fire insurance maps you can find. The Sanborn Map Company was the most successful of the fire insurance map companies. And they created over 700,000 individual map sheets between 1866 and 1977, and they covered over 12,000 United States cities. And the Library of Congress, I believe, has almost all of them. That doesn't mean that they are online. It just means that the Library of Congress has almost all of them. And if you visit there, you could probably ask to look for one. They have also been microfilmed, and they are online through other databases, and companies like ProQuest has made them available, and as has FEMA, which is in fire insurance maps online, which we'll talk about more in a few more minutes. But they are maps, the fire insurance maps made by Sanborn, for example, are of cities and towns. They are not of counties, and they show street names. They show the individual buildings. They can show you the types of businesses, and they show you the layout of the city. It is very, very important to look at the index at the beginning of the atlas to identify which sheet you need to go to. And also, there is a special index with lists of businesses, public buildings, factories, and other large structures within a city. To say that these can be immensely helpful to a great variety of people today is an understatement. They are fantastic, and the makers used colors and symbols to identify buildings, to identify dwellings. For example, color was used to designate the construction material of a building. Was it made of wood? Was it made of brick, tile, stone, concrete? You can find that by looking at a Sanborn atlas. Abbreviations were used to identify the type of establishment. S equals store. D equals dwelling. F, the letter F equals or means a flat or an apartment. And then how large? Is it a one-story building or a two-story building? Does it have a basement? Letters and numbers are used to provide you with that kind of information. And it can even tell you if there's a brick chimney, the elevation. Are there hydrants on the street? Is there a fire alarm box nearby? Automatic sprinklers. Of course, that's later 20th century, but you get the gist of it. You can get a lot of information about structures on a fire insurance map. And of course, line type indicates walls, doorways, passageways, and other details of a particular building. Does it provide the name of the owners of a home or a lot? No. They may identify the name of a business or a church or a high school, but not the names of lot owners or house owners. So when you're using Sanborn maps, it's very helpful to use these in combination with the city directory or federal census records to determine the name of the property owner at a particular lot, because they do provide addresses. So if someone lived at 597 West Main Street in Richmond in 1905, you may not see the name of that person on the fire the Sanborn Fire Insurance map for Richmond for 1905. But by golly, you might find them in a city directory, and you may find their name listed in the census for the year 1900 or 1910. And a lot of people like to use these maps because you get, if your ancestor lived in a city or town that was mapped by Sanborn Fire Insurance Company, you can use these to get an idea of what your ancestors' dwelling was like. You get a sense of composition and size of the building. You also get insight into their economic and social landscape. And these, again, are used not only by genealogists, but by urban planners, archaeologists. The number of users just runs the gamut. And I cannot overemphasize the fact that you need to look at the symbols and you need to look at the legend before you start using the atlas. That's very, very, very important. And you should be able to find the legend at the beginning of an atlas. If not, you should be able to find the legend or online somewhere, because that's very important. You need to know the colors and you need to know what the abbreviations mean. So putting it all together, we've looked at a lot of maps the last few weeks, and as you use them in your genealogical research, here's a couple of questions and ideas that you can use as you try to put your information together. What question are you trying to answer? That's number one. You need to figure out what your question is, and then once you figure out what your question is, you can then try to figure out what type of map includes that information. And then you can try to figure out where those maps are located. And then you can analyze the map for those clues. And then you can repeat it, repeat these actions. What's your question? What type of maps might answer that question? Where are these maps located? They could be online, they may be in a local public library, they may be in a state library, they may be in an archives. Then analyze the maps for clues. And then if that one doesn't work, then start over again. So as you work with these maps, it's important to know basic names of your ancestors, where they lived, and dates. And of course, you may be trying to figure out where they lived. Having basic names and dates and just at least knowing the state and an idea of the county of residence is a big help. But if you're trying to figure that out, census records can assist you with that, because census records are arranged by state and then by county, and that would be a very good place to start. And you know, some questions you may be asking yourself is why did my ancestor move from one city to another? Where would court records for them be located? Is it going to be in this county? Is it going to be in that county? Which neighborhood or town did they live in? What was that neighborhood like? Once you articulate these kinds of questions, then you can start to figure out what maps you need to use in your research. Sometimes several, you might need to use several. Sometimes you just might need to use one. It's always helpful to look for a map that has the best information and that's easy to locate. And where can you find maps? Well, you can find maps in a lot of places now. 25 years ago, you basically had to visit a library to look at a lot of maps or buy maps for your use. But today, that's changed. The Library of Congress is putting a number of maps online, have put a number of maps online. We are in the process of putting maps online. And once we have transferred over to our new digital management system, which is called Rosetta, we will then begin to be able to begin putting additional maps online. So we are working on doing that. The David Rumsey Map Collection is an excellent website to visit for 19th century maps, 20th century maps. For Virginia in particular, it's a great place to try to find 19th century maps. The New York Public Library has an awesome collection of maps. They just do. It's fantastic. The University of Texas is a great place to go. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Information, NOAA, has historical maps and charts online, and that's very, very helpful. If you're looking for topographic maps, the National Map is a great place to go. I prefer going to USGS TopoView for topographic maps. That's fantastic. If you are researching colonial Virginia, the UK National Archives and the British Library are fantastic places to visit. The British Library, I have found their catalog to be awesome to use, and I just find it in general easier to use, their website easier to maneuver and use than the UK National Archives. In saying that, visit both. Now, if you want to access Sanborn maps, historic maps of Virginia, let's say you can't, what you're looking for is not in any of these, they're not in any of located in any of these websites or in their search engines or in their catalogs. You can check with your local public libraries to see if they subscribe to digital Sanborn maps, Historic MapWorks Library Edition, or FEMA, which is Fire Insurance Maps Online. If you are a Virginia resident and you have a Library of Virginia library card, you have access to digital Sanborn maps, you have access to Historic MapWorks Online, and you have access to FEMA through our website. You have access to all of them through our website, and I'm going to show you how to get to all of those right now. And here is a list of select maps displayed in this PowerPoint presentation. Most of them are not online. The last two listed are, but the map of Accomack, state highway map from 1922, and the aeronautic map from Aerial Age Weekly are not online yet. They are in the Library of Virginia collections, and they were specifically scanned for use for this presentation and for this program. The last two listed are online, and of course the Sanborn map images are definitely going to be online. So let me get out of the PowerPoint here, and let's go to the Library of Virginia website. So I can show you how to get to the databases. So here's the Library of Virginia website as it's popping up. I'm waiting for it to come. There we go. Here's the home page. And if you want to see which databases we subscribe to, click on the phrase using the collections. Scroll down and click on the blue colored phrase databases and ebooks. From here, scroll down to you see maps and architecture. Click on this phrase, and then the drop-down menu will appear. Digital Sanborn maps 1867 to 1970. This collection is hosted by ProQuest. The maps are in black and white only, but it's a complete set of basically Sanborn maps of Virginia from about 1885 to 1955 or 1952, something like that. And it's easy to browse and explore. If you're using this site, you're only going to be able to access Virginia maps only, and you can select a locality to search. Williamsburg is where I live, so I'm going to show you Williamsburg here. And then you can select a date. Let's just do 1904. And so hopefully this will show up soon. So we've done all that. Here we go. And here comes the first sheet. Now, notice and remember, I mentioned how important color is in this when you're researching Sanborn maps. Because FEMA, which does provide colored Sanborn insurance maps, is not complete. Their collection of Sanborns is not as complete as ProQuest. We subscribe to both. And it's very possible that as you look at this 1904 map, which you can zoom in to look at more closely, and here's the index, of course, if you need to look at the color version, it's very possible for you to zoom out of or to get out of the ProQuest version, go back to FEMO, for which you need to have a library card as well to access. And click on FEMO to view the colored version. FEMO, Fire Insurance Maps Online. Now, as you work on this at home, you are going to be asked to include your library card number. It's allowing me to go right on in because I'm on the library's system. So it's recognizing my computer automatically. So that's why it's allowing me to enter in without entering in my library card number. And then it gives you the option of an interactive map or a place name search. I tend to like to search by place name myself. Everyone is different. You can select Virginia. Again, our subscription is for Virginia only. And again, I'm going to choose Williamsburg because that's where I live. And of course, here is a 1904 Sanborn map. There are other things that you can do. You can download JPEGs from this, which is very helpful. You can also download copies from the ProQuest database as well. And the circling, it's indicating it's reading. Hopefully it won't take this long from your home computer, but it's thinking. Hopefully the map will appear shortly. Well, let me refresh it and see if that helps. There we go. Oh, while we're waiting for that, let's take a look at how to get to Historic MapWorks. And again, just follow the same procedure. Click on using the collections. Scroll down to databases and ebooks. Click Maps and Architecture. And then from this menu, click Historic MapWorks Library Edition. And in Historic MapWorks Library Edition, you will be asked to provide your library barcode number, so don't be surprised when they ask that. And I always have to click to enable Adobe Flash Player. You may not need to from your home computer, but I do. And so what I find very helpful is you can search or you can browse. And if you browse, you can click on the United States, and then you can pick the state that you're interested in. And I'm just going to choose Virginia. And then it automatically shows the atlases that are available for you to review. And as I mentioned earlier, you may be interested in taking a look at the Frederick County 1885 map, county map that was published in 1885, obviously. And as it appears, ProQuest gives you the option. What it does is it shows every map in the atlas, and then you have the option of clicking on it. You can actually overlay this map on a present day map as well by clicking on that, by clicking on this phrase overlay. But as you can see, you have the option to zoom in. And then here is the names of individuals and the location of the post office. And what they've done is they've broken up Frederick County into political subdivisions. And so I think this is a map of the entire county, but the atlas does break it down into political subdivisions. And so if you need to look more closely into a particular division, you can just hit the back button and it will take you back to the main menu. And if you go up here, there are atlas directory pages listed. And this is where you can find the names of subscribers to the atlas. List of patrons for the Atlas of Frederick County, Virginia. And as you zoom in, you can see the name, the post office, their occupation, and their county or state or country of origin. That can be pretty helpful. And once you finish looking at that, you can scroll back. And then it actually has a section for Atlas history pages. So again, if you want to know more about Frederick, that might be a great place to go. Well, let's see if this is working yet. No, it is still, I'm going to have to talk to our liaison to find out why it's not working. But you should, at home, if you try this from home, a color page from the Sanborn Atlas should appear. You should not be getting this running circle with the blue colors. But back to Historic MapWorks. And of course, you can see other localities that are available. There is a really cool map of Henrico County from 1901. It's in 21 maps that make it up. It was completed by T. Crawford Red, brother, and and they were well-known and prolific surveyors in Henrico County in the 19th and 20th centuries. And as you scroll down, you should see an 1885 map for Rockingham County, and then there is the atlas, for Rockingham County, and then the 1885 atlas for Shenandoah and Page counties, and then you'll find maps for other localities. And so those are ways that you can get to those 1885 atlases and to additional maps of Virginia localities. And since this is not working, I am going to go back to the Library of Virginia's homepage to show you again where you can find maps that we've scanned and placed online. And again, just go back to our homepage, click on not using the collections, but the Virginia Memory link. And this is going to take you to our digital access management system. I like to choose collections A to Z. You don't have to, but I do. And then once this page appears, I like to go to the letter M for maps. And then I click on the map collections. And once you get to this page, what I do, because it's just showing all 1,942 maps, I find that overwhelming. So I click on this phrase, map collections, and then it breaks up the collections. Virginia Board of Public Works maps, our Civil War maps, our city maps, our colonial maps, our county maps are all here. And since we've been talking about county maps, I'm just going to take you to this page just as an example to provide you with an example of maps that are in the county section. We have, for example, a map of Powhatan County from 1880. And here's the catalog description for it. And then you click on the object to actually look at the map. And this is a PDF copy. And because this digital management system is old, it may take a minute or two for the map to upload, the PDF copy to upload. But please stay with it. It will upload. And hopefully sooner rather than later. And we've put up a two county maps that were made in the 1850s. A Yardley-Taylor map of Loudoun County, for any of those of you who are researching Loudoun County, and also the Smith map of Henrico County. And the Smith map of Henrico County was used as a, let's just say it was a helpful source for the Union and Confederate armies during the Peninsular Campaign of 1862. Particularly if you are researching Henrico County during the American Civil War, you'll notice that Union topographical engineers used the Smith map as their source, as their base map. And so we do have that map. It was published in Philadelphia around 1853. And the Loudoun County map, completed by Yardley-Taylor, was published in the 1850s as well. And so those are two very helpful county maps that you could use and rely on if you're researching those counties at that particular time. And yes, we do, they do get used frequently. And as I said, it may take a minute or two with our old digital management system for this map to appear. And thank you for staying with me as it finishes uploading. And here we go. What I like to do is move this margin up so that you get a better view of the map. And then from this point forward, you can click on the zoom features to zoom in on the map. And the clarity is fairly good. I always click on this top box here to provide me with the ability to move across the map to scroll, because you can't pan the map. Hopefully when Rosetta is implemented, you will be able to pan the map instead of using the mouse to move it. But as you can see, there's a lot of neat and nifty information on this particular map. So it is 11:20, and I'm sure that that's a lot of time to be spent talking about maps. So if you have any additional questions, you can always contact me at the Library of Virginia. My email is cassandra.farrell@lva.virginia.gov. And the library is open for researchers Tuesday through Friday from 10 to 4. You do need to call to make an appointment. If you're interested in reviewing maps or researching maps, you can contact me by email. You can try telephoning as well. My number is 804-692-3617. And if you can't find something, always give me a call or send me an email, because it could be that your map that you're looking at is online, has been scanned, but it's just hard to find. That can happen quite a bit. And always remember that there are plenty of places to look for maps. This is our website is a good place to look for county and city maps for Virginia. The Library of Congress is an excellent resource for that same information. Always check the New York Public Library website, and of course the David Rumsey map collection online also is an awesome resource as well. So I hope this has been helpful, and please let us know if you have any questions. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Cassandra. We have a couple of questions. The first one is from Zola Noble. How can I find out the rail route from Marion, Virginia to Mexico, Missouri that my grandparents took in 1909? Also, why might they have chosen this destination?
That's a great question. And I'm going to have to get back to you on that because I'm going to have to actually to see which maps would include that railroad line. And there should be some maps of the United States from 1909 or 1910 that show it. So if you could provide Ashley with your contact information, I can get back to you. Is that okay?
Yeah, that should be great. I can get the email for you.
Okay.
The next question is from Carrie Richardson. And can you please provide me more information on the 1889 City of Richmond map you referenced earlier? I believe it was the
Based Atlas. Yes. Yes.
And is it available online?
The Based Atlas, let's see. I know that we have a copy in our collections. I know that I personally have a PDF copy that I use, but we have not been able to put it online on our website yet because it's a huge atlas, which is a good thing. But let's see if they have it at the Library of Congress. And the Based Atlas, they do have, let's see, Washington, Indianapolis, Washington, D.C., Washington, D.C. And there, let's see, let's do Based in Richmond and see if it comes up here. That would have been the smart thing to do from the beginning. I know that the Beers Atlas for Richmond is in Historic Mapworks. And I don't know, I don't believe I've seen it, the Based Atlas in Historic Mapworks. Okay. Well, what I may need to do is check on that for you as well. We do have copies here at the library, but let me check to see where, if it's available online, where it might be. So I will need to get your email information and contact information too and get back with you.
I can provide that for you, Cassandra. Okay. The next question is from Pamela Harrison, and she would like to know, would postal maps indicate the boundaries for postal office? I've noticed that some census mention postal districts, and I want to find the boundaries because the census doesn't list a street, often when it's a census for a county, and I'm trying to figure out where in the county my ancestors lived.
You can, postal route maps, the Library of Congress has an excellent collection of those, and that would be a great place to start, especially if you know which year you're looking for. The other consideration, if it's 20th century, a lot of times the post office was producing postal route maps for a particular county. So the time period will depend upon which kind of map you can access. And then gazetteers that were published in the 19th century are awesome because they list the county and then they list the names of the post offices in that particular county. And coast surveys, I don't recall seeing post offices listed on coast surveys. That doesn't mean that they aren't, but I don't recall ever seeing one on there. Again, that doesn't mean they aren't there. But that would be a good reference question. And that is something that I can get back to you by email as well, if that's okay.
She has one additional question, and I'm going to paraphrase it. It's about citing maps in your own personal genealogy books or sources. How would you best cite maps in your own genealogy for
That is an excellent question. And I have had to, and that's one that you don't often find listed. And I think I had to compile, when I started doing this, I had to look at the, because I have a history background, I used Turabian's manual for writing, and I use the suggestions that she has. And what I've started doing, and I think I have it listed on the back page, which I do, of the PowerPoint presentation, is this is what I've been doing, providing the name of the author, the title of the map, the collection where you can find it, and the call number. And the call number is the most important information. The collection where the map is found and the call number is most important. So I would follow that format: the author, title, map collection, and then the call number or accession number for that map.
Thank you, everyone, for attending our map workshop. Thank you, Cassandra, for doing this for us.
Thank you for coming.